think we're ready. We're very grateful that there are no cell service interruption problems today. So
That would be good.
We're good. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And by way of introducing ourselves and our seminar. So my name is Jen Holden. I'm here with Walter Lang and Megan Kopi, and we are the three principal realtors at the Jen Holden Group. And our seminar today is called Ready, Set, Sell, because we get a lot of questions from clients who either have never sold a home or who say it's been 15 or 20 years since I've sold a home and I don't understand the process at all. So just wanted to give each of Walter and Megan a minute to introduce themselves and just kind of say, you know, what your areas of expertise are and what you want everybody to know about you. So Walter, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, Walter Lang. I wouldn't say I have one specific thing that I do. When first joining Jen Holden, I primarily did a lot of buyers agent stuff for her, but I've got my own book of things that I, manage as well. So, I guess I can mention I was Baltimore Real Producers 30 Under 30 last year. So that's something.
Yes.
Yes. Yay.
A big achievement. Hi. And Megan?
Well, good. Well, I am Megan Kopi. I really specialize all over Maryland, in particular Anne Arundel County, over across the bridge on the Eastern Shore, as well as other counties as well. And I'm both your buyer's agent as well as listing agent. I'm here to help whatever you need for your real estate needs.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, and one thing that's important to understand about us is that as a group, we all have experience as listing agents. So if you have questions for anybody as far as how the process works, we do all maintain that within our client base. So we're happy to help with any kind of questions about that. But so basically, I wanted to start out with a review of the steps in selling your home. And just to give you a very broad overview. So if this is on your horizon, here are the general steps in selling your home. And probably the main thing to remember is, just like with anything else that you do, the success is in the preparation. So you're going to feel like we are spending an inordinate amount of time talking about preparation. And that's because that's where all the magic happens on your part and our part. Is really what's going to set you up. If you wait until you're on the market to think about these things, that's when we're really going to struggle. So even if you said you needed to get on the market a week from today or just in a couple of days, you're still going to see that before we press play, there's a lot of steps that we kind of take over. And guys, feel free to chime in anytime, but really the main thing to think about first is decide on what your goals are, right? Why are you putting yourself through this? Is there a place that you need to be, or is it just time to get out of this house? How much time and energy do you have to devote to the process? Do you need it to be over with quickly? Are you trying to get the most money for your house? What other considerations do you have? Sometimes for people, they end up with a home they've already moved. And so an easy process is the most important. For some people, there's a home they would like to buy. So getting the most money for their current home is the most important, even if it takes a little bit longer. So the first thing that any of us will do if we're talking with you about selling your house is really primarily really focus in on why are you selling? What are your goals? And that's the way we can best help you maximize what you want to get done. The second step, and we'll kind of go into each of these in a little bit of detail. Second step is to get your house ready. That means get repairs done that you need to do and get ready for the market. Then while you're kind of working on repairs that you need to do and other things, decluttering and other things that you need to do, that's when we sort of prepare our marketing plan. One of the big pieces of that, so step 2 is you preparing your house. Step 3 is working together with you, we will help you decide on an accurate list price. So what we always say is aggressive but fair. So working on the list price, number 3. Number 4 is all of our market preparation. That's where people talk about staging, photography, and all of these, other add-ons that we would do, whether that's a video, aerial photography, print advertising, specialty things, or anything like that, but really putting our marketing plan together. Then once we have all of your pre-market planning done, pre-market networking done, then we'll go ahead and put the house on the market. So we'll talk a little bit today about what that process is like while you're on the market, the showings, how people make appointments, what that looks like even in the COVID era. Then once you're on the market, the next step is receiving offers, evaluating those, and deciding on a contract. And then what's that timeline like from contract to closing? Once you're under contract, you'll have a home inspection first, then you'll have a home appraisal. So how are those different now than they've been before? How is that different when you're the seller versus the buyer? A not insignificant piece of this is moving. So a lot of times we have people who sort of forget they needed to line up a pod or a moving van, and we can call in the cavalry, but the more time we have, the better with that. So that is not an insignificant step. And then what actually does closing mean now, and how does that work? And what do you need to do as a seller? So to kind of get through that. So, essentially what we end up with are what I call the 5 big questions. One is, what do you need to do to get the house ready? And I always say clean and clutter-free is 90% of the way there. You have to be super clean, and you have to be able for buyers to envision themselves in your home. It needs to be decluttered. But Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of what your process is to help sellers get ready?
Yeah, absolutely. So to that point, exactly. You want to declutter as much as possible. So when someone walks through that front door, you want to allow them to be able to visualize their stuff on the walls, where their couch and beds and such are going to go. To be able to do that, you need to kind of clear as much out as possible. I understand that's a huge undertaking, and some of that can help you though. Pre-pack, get yourself ready to even move, and doing that can kind of kill two birds with one stone in doing that. So that's a really good thing. Also, when you start to declutter, you'll say, wait, we kind of maybe need to repaint something, get some softer colors on the wall. And that, of course, you're cleaning as well, that kind of stuff. There's also repairs that you kind of all of a sudden will start to see need to be redone, fixes and such around the house. So in doing that, it'd be great if you can get it done up beforehand, but also if price all of a sudden is coming to play and you aren't able to really afford to make some of these fixes and repairs, Coldwell Banker has a great program, and it's called the Revitalize program. So we'll bring in some local pros, kind of work with what needs to be done or should be done. We're all in agreement, and Coldwell Banker will pay those fees up front. And then on the back end, we get reimbursed for those charges. Nothing is inflated or any type of markups or anything like that. It's pretty straightforward. So we can definitely help you in that sense too. So, but decluttering is probably the number one thing, along with also curb appeal outside. That's the very first thing they're going to see when they pull up, whether that's landscaping, front door, new shutters, anything along those lines, just a new paint color on the door. So things like that too. So we can take a look and work with you in figuring out what's best to get your house sold fast and for the highest price.
I will say for that, that first impression is something that can't be redone, right? So if you're thinking, oh, maybe I'll just warn people this is what's going to happen, or this can be taken care of after the fact if buyers have a problem with it, don't go that route unless you're expecting to the buyers to already take into account what offer price they're going to give you based on these things that would need to be done. Even if you're still taking care of them, the first impression is already going to ruin it if they decide, oh, like something's majorly wrong with this drywall over here, or this paint, or these cabinets, or whatever the case may be. Once they have that in their head, it's over.
Yep.
And a lot of that is we're in such a fast-paced market that buyers are trying to weed things out very, very quickly. So you want to give them reasons to weed you in, not weed you out. But Walter's completely correct. And the other reason to kind of remember that along with curb appeal is that when we, market your home online, buyers look at one photo. And if that one first front photo doesn't reflect the curb appeal and the style that the buyer is looking for, you may not get them back. They may not even close 3 pictures to see how beautiful your kitchen is, or, your backyard or any other feature. So really making sure you make a good first impression is super critical. That's another reason that a lot of times we're going to recommend things like painting, new carpet if the carpet is too stained or can't be cleaned, other sort of basic updates that the time you have to do one price reduction, you would have already, spent that money, and now at least you've got a house that makes a really good first impression. So clean, smells good, fresh paint, nice landscaping, maybe a power wash, some other things that we can help you walk through. And the other thing to keep in mind is that we do have staging and interior design partners. So they can do a consultation for you where they just walk through and write up recommendations. They can help you with selecting items that you might need to decorate, or if the house is vacant, they can actually fully stage it. And, depending on our agreement, what I've started to do is actually cover the costs of that. Because I believe so strongly in the difference that it makes when a home is properly staged. And we see it all the time that it makes a difference in getting a house sold. So, okay, so the second really big question for most sellers is, how will you as a realtor be marketing my home? And we have some great programs within Coldwell Banker that are fairly unique. One is called Listing Concierge, and that provides a huge range of options as far as print flyers, beautiful print mailers to your neighborhood, a narrated video of your home, a website, specific destination website, not to mention some fantastic online advertising that will reach buyers in your specific area. So that's one thing that kind of sets Coldwell Banker apart. In addition to the Real Vitalize to help you get ready, we have Listing Concierge to really make a great first impression. We also have professional photography and videography companies that we work with. So that you're going to, as we say, win the view contest online, because we'll have fantastic pictures for you. Now, one thing that we've started to use, especially in the COVID era, so this is something that might be a little different if you haven't sold a house in a while, is the availability of the 3D models. So I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like that really helps a lot of our buyer clients get a much better idea of the layout of the house, the floor plan, kind of how they would use the flow of the house even before they go to see it. So that's something that we can absolutely put together. And then, I think the other piece of marketing that's very, very important is there's no substitute for in-person networking. Good old fashioned talking to other agents, reaching out to agents who've sold in your area. Within Coldwell Banker, we have a network that's called Exclusive Look, where we can market your home to all the other Coldwell Banker agents in the region, not to mention the ability to reach out directly to buyers once you're on the market with open houses, which we can now do again. And all kinds of other ways to directly reach the community. So, I think it's very important that you feel comfortable with each step of that, but just be aware that we'll be putting together a very comprehensive marketing plan for you guys. Now, while we're doing that, we're also going to be working together with you on pricing strategy. So preparation, super key. Pricing is super key. No amount of marketing is going to sell a house that's not properly priced. So Walter is our data guy, and I thought you could talk a little bit about your process for pricing a home, what things you go over with a seller.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different kind of factors that go into how we price a home. And it's not just simply the CMA, but we'll talk about that first. The CMA is the market analysis for your house. Now, what we do is much like what an appraiser would do. We take the last 6 months, maybe even a year, if we're not finding that there's a lot of homes that have sold in the area, and we'll start in your neighborhood. If your neighborhood is the kind that has a lot of similar model homes, similar style, like a builder came through and built a bunch of the same ones, makes it a lot easier to take your street or your neighborhood and run numbers that way. If not, we kind of expand it to the whole zip code, or even the whole county if we have to, if your property is really unique. We'll take into account things like, is there waterfront or water amenities or any kind of HOA amenities, anything unique to your property. We'll try to match it up with others in the area. Now, what we look at in terms of price is the last 6 months. We'll kind of take an average, and we'll also look at what the condition of the property is. So if you have a completely brand new flipped rehab home, that's obviously going to be a higher price than something that is super dated and needs to be updated, and we'll adjust accordingly to those. So if there's 5 homes out of 10 that show that they're really updated and your house is really updated as well, we'll use those 5 instead of the other 5 that will lower your average. The other thing we'll take a look at is this neighborhood one of those price points that buyers are asking for 2-3% seller closing help, sometimes even more. If you have an FHA or VA loan, they'll allow you to ask for more. We've seen 4% or 5% in the past too. So it's not uncommon. So if you're living in a neighborhood that's a lower price point that we know a lot of first-time home buyers are going to be coming through and submitting offers, we got to prepare for that. So when we go to your price, we have to also write you a net proceeds sheet that says this is what you might walk away with after you pay off your principal mortgage or your commissions and your closing costs. We'll also take into account, are we going to prepare to give seller closing help? So all those kind of things. And then am I missing anything, you guys, on that aspect of things?
No, and you know what, you bring up something that's really important, which is understanding your seller's net. And what we mean by that is we'll list out for you, if you can sell your house at this particular price after you pay all your fees, taxes, charges, everything else, what do you expect to be your bottom line? There's no, you have to really be crystal clear on that before you go on the market. I know it's a crazy market, and a lot of times you're in a hurry because you're under contract on a house and you've got to sell your house super fast. But, this is, at the end of the day, home buying is for most people, a very exciting process because you're moving forward into something. Home selling is a business transaction. So we've got to get to the place mentally where we can understand that. And the seller's net is the best tool you have for doing that, because no matter how much you feel swayed by a particular buyer's offer, it has to make sense for you financially. So Walter, that's a really, really good point. The only other thing I would say is that nowhere in his consideration, by the way, of everything he just said, did he say, well, I paid $300 for my house and I've spent $150 renovating it, so it has to be worth $450, right? That's
no.
Unfortunately, we all wish that was the case. My husband, chief among them, wishes that was the case. It's not guaranteed that that's the case. We really have to look at what your comparable sales are and how your market is. What's the demand? How much is out there right now? If you're sitting there with a year's worth of supply, you've got to be awfully competitive. If at your price point or your segment of the market, there's an abundance of choice for the buyer. Right now, we're kind of in the opposite situation where buyers are going crazy trying to find inventory. So, there is a temptation to maybe overprice a little bit, and our concern with that, or where we're going to guide you with that, is that the house also has to appraise. And this is maybe a little bit different than what you thought about when you were the buyer, or maybe a little bit different than when you purchased a home, but the appraisal is super, super key here. And that's really what we call our second sale. So we sell your home the first time to a buyer and the second time to an appraiser. And if, like Walter said, if he can find you 5 great comparables and you have either pushed up your purchase price because you want to give the buyer some closing help, or just because you think the market's hot and I can go 10% above what somebody else just sold their house for, the appraisal is definitely going to be something that we're going to have to think about as well.
Yeah. Now,
So-
if an appraiser, now it's not a deal killer if the appraiser doesn't appraise it and you have, let's just say, because I've seen this already happen before in the past couple weeks, that let's say your listing has 10 offers on it. And people are overbidding each other just to get this house. If it's that high demand and the appraiser says, look, you're still 10 grand over what we could possibly appraise this at. Sometimes it's not necessarily the end of the deal if your buyer is willing to come up with that extra money in cash. So if they really love it that much, or if, let's say you're representing or you're the buyer, you have to weigh how much you want that property, because somebody will potentially want to pay an extra 10 grand in cash to secure that property.
Good point.
Yeah, and I think the important thing about that to remember is, number one, that's a calculated risk for you as the seller, right? If you're inundated with offers and you have to choose, you really need to look at what the risks are of each one. But also, like Walter said, don't ever assume that anything is going to be a complete deal breaker. We always say on our team, we don't give up, right? Like, we don't quit. So if there's a way to make something work, we're going to do everything we possibly can, and always try to be very work towards a positive outcome for you. So, we don't give up, but it's definitely something that we'll kind of try to guide you to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So, another big question that most sellers have is, how long is this going to take?
Mhm.
And, and the best thing we can do in that case is figure out for you, we should have a pretty good idea when we price your house of what are the average days on the market around you. And we will be working with you very closely to monitor those days on the market, because somewhere around the 2 to 3 week mark, if we don't have a contract, we're going to be wanting to have that discussion about whether or not we need to make a price adjustment for you. But, past sales are a good guide, and pending sales are a good guide. Your neighbor who sold it himself in a day is not a good guide. We look at the preponderance of evidence in the market. But at the end of the day, if we know the average days on the market in your neighborhood is 21 and you get to 45, your house hasn't sold, we're going to come to you and say it's the price. And we'll always go through our marketing plan with you, and we'll always discuss it with you. But it's important to remember that if it hasn't sold in what could be considered a reasonable period of time, it's almost certain that you've got some examining of your price to do, if not some other things. And then finally, everybody wants to know, okay, I'm full of information now. I understand I have to make repairs. We're going to price the house right. We're going to do, I'm overwhelmed. What do I do first? So, or what do I do next? How do I get started? And I don't know what you guys have found. As with everything else, what I found is if we pick a date and say, this is our goal to get on the market, we're much more likely to hit it than just to say, we'll get started when we're ready.
Yeah. And breathe. It'll be okay.
And breathe and plan, make a plan.
Yes. Yep.
Set a date, make a plan of the things that you need to do. And then, kind of the final thing in that I would say as to how you get started is to really make sure you've developed your understanding of where you're going next, right? So we talked about your goals at the very beginning. Where are you going? Do you need to find that house and get it under contract? That's going to really kind of drive your first steps. If you've already bought your new home, if this is, an estate sale or an investment property versus your personal residence, kind of use that to figure out, how do you establish a timeline to get started?
Sure.
But we can help you with kind of setting up that plan. So I think I also wanted to ask you guys, Walter and Megan, what you see as far as what is different now? What's different in this market in this year that you see that sellers should be aware of as opposed to years past?
So much is different just in the last couple months alone. But I think you've heard this from not just us, that we reiterate this all the time, but a lot of other agents out there, or any kind of news story that you pop up about the real estate market, is there are no homes out there. The inventory is so low these last couple of years, and it's only been getting worse. And a little bit of that this year has been, obviously the pandemic has affected it a little bit. So there's been a drastic drop in inventory the last couple months, in an already heavy sellers market where buyers are having a tough time. Now they have an even tougher time, which, you know, kind of explains why what I said before, there's 10 offers on these listings sometimes. So lots of low inventory has caused competitiveness and prices to skyrocket. And I don't know if this is sustainable, but it's continuing to go up and prove me wrong every time. I've had buyers that have tried to adjust for this spike in prices and say, okay, I'm going to overbid by this much because I know this is the direction we're heading in. Because what we've been losing on, it's like a learning curve, right? Every single time we lose on a multiple offer property, we decide, okay, this isn't working. We need to try this now. We need to try this. And it keeps going up and we keep getting proven wrong. So I think it's sort of a fluke thing right now, but it is a trend that we've seen over the last couple of years, is things are just kind of going up and up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also one of those things, just talking with kind of the first part of the discussion that we first started, was that to get your house ready to sell, a lot of stuff is done virtually, online. That's how they're going to see your house for the first time, is online. So you want to make sure that you declutter and do that stuff, paint, carpets, curb appeal, and those pictures that we will help you, the Jen Holden Group, to get done, as well as some videos and stuff like that. That's also important because everything's pretty much done online. It's all online buyers, or a lot of it, shouldn't say all.
Yeah, making that good first impression online, it has never been more important. There are people who want to know everything they can know before they put on the mask and gloves and go look at a property right now. And our buyers will feel like they know all there is to know about a house before they go see it. They'll say, oh, I just saw it. This is the one. And they know, sometimes feel like they know before they even go in, because there's so many virtual tools available for them to learn, all kinds of things about the house, and not even the house, but the area. Like, think about, there's, I would say probably 90% of my buyers will look at a house on Google Earth to see, how's it situated in the neighborhood? Is it right next to a major highway? Is it next to a park? Is it under a power line? So it doesn't mean they won't like it, but they like to have all this information before they go. And I think the other thing that has come as a surprise to maybe not first-time sellers, because if you've recently bought a home, you might be used to this, but if you haven't sold a home in a while, home inspections are very high tech now, and very in-depth. So, whether or not you think a pre-inspection is a good idea is a very personal decision. I wouldn't consider it to be a fail-safe, although if it's been 20 years, it could possibly be helpful. There's a lot of nuances that go into that decision, but don't be surprised to see a home inspector come in with all different kinds of gadgets. They bring moisture meters and they bring infrared cameras. I was at one last week where the inspector now has a drone, so he can fly it up over top of the house and look at, if it's a 3-story house and there's no way he could get on the roof. Well, now he can see the roof. So just be prepared that it can feel mildly invasive if you're not ready for all that to be going down.
So about the inspection, it's really important to also keep in mind that every inspector will have different opinions about certain little things too. So you could think your house is flawless, and it might be to most people, but an inspector can come in and pick it apart still. So please do not be offended by how inspectors write the reports about your house, because odds are the next home inspector might say that's not an issue, or so take it with a grain of salt. Don't freak out and say I'm offended and this buyer is asking me of things that aren't a big deal in your opinion, but and that's what that pre-inspection can be helpful for, to just be proactive, because if these little tiny items that you can take care of pretty easily, that's again goes with that first impression. So not only do you have to first impress the buyers when they're looking through the house, but then once they have their home inspection, if their first impression after the home inspection is, oh, there's not a whole lot of issues in here because he's done every outlet the correct way now because you had a pre-inspection, that's again a hurdle you don't even have to jump if you do that ahead of time.
It buys you a lot of goodwill. And, we talk a lot about, when we talk about repairs, some of these things could even be cosmetic. As an example, I had a leak in my basement bathroom. We fixed the leak. We've never patched the ceiling because it's a textured ceiling and we would want to replace it, right? So before I sell the house, I'm going to have to do that. It doesn't mean there's a leak, but if a buyer looked at it today, they would think there was a problem. And you don't want to give them, when a buyer leaves your house, you want them thinking, where does my furniture go? Because I love it here. Not, well, I would have to do the roof and I'd have to fix that plumbing problem and who knows what other problems there might be. But, Walter also makes a really good point too, that the home inspection for a seller can be one of the more challenging parts of the process emotionally. It can really be irritating for you because not only did somebody just go through your house and give you a 100-page report, but they might be wrong about some things, or they might have noted something that they didn't fully understand and you can explain to them. So that's why you have us, because we are here to help you through that process and give you the benefit of our experience and help you investigate and put numbers around things and ask lots of questions so that you get through it. But definitely prepare yourself that is not, I've yet to meet a person who enjoys finding out everything that's wrong with their house. So it's definitely a piece of the process that, you sort of need to take it in, sit with it a little bit. You do have a set period of time before you have to respond. You don't have to respond immediately. So you can kind of give yourself a little time with that. But Walter's very right that, that's definitely a tricky one to get through. There were just a couple other little things that I wanted to talk about. Megan, maybe you could talk a little about your experience with showing houses and how sellers are working with, showing time to schedule appointments and what it's like now with the overlapping rule being taken away. And
yeah, so obviously you want to allow as many people into your house just so you can show it off. So there's, rules that you can put into place if you have pets and so forth and so on. Obviously, you want to make it as easy as possible for somebody to get into your house to see it with another agent. So we can work with you to figure out what works best for you and your family. You might have kids or again, pets, something along those lines. Right now, things are still required for masks to be worn. We can put some things in place if you're still feeling uneasy. Follow the rules that are being out there and mandated. So we'll work with you in what's best to get the showings in and as much as possible. So we'll work with you to do that, as well as we can set it up to where it's one of you can, as a seller, can approve them. They can just be approved automatically. You can, if you'd like, have an hour's notice, things like that, but we'll work with you on that.
Mm-hmm. And that process is very customizable, but what you said first is probably the most key point, right? So if your house is properly prepared and properly priced, people still have to be able to get in to see it, to make offers on it. So making sure that at the time you go on the market, you are able to take full advantage of, if not the vast majority of showing requests is going to be very, very important. We call those first 14 days your golden days on the market. That's the best opportunity you have to find a buyer, because the buyers out there right now, like Walter said, they are stalking the market. They've seen everything that there is, and they are waiting to pounce on your house. And if you pass that opportunity by in those first 14 days because you're not able to show it, it's going to really impact your bottom line. So
People are gonna
making
wonder
sure that
what's
you're
wrong.
prepared to do that is key.
Right.
But,
Yep.
yeah.
People will probably wonder what's wrong if your house has been sitting on the market too long and you don't have offers. They're gonna be like, oh, well, there's a reason why in this market nowadays
Why
it's
is
not
it
gone. So
Yeah.
two more things about that Megan brought up, about, you know, having pets and stuff like that. So one is pets. We're the entire Jen Holden Group. Everybody has at least one dog. So we love our animals dearly. But it's one of those things that not everybody shares the same passion for our four-legged friends. So when you're getting your house ready for people to come through and show it, please have a plan for your pets. Your pets should not just be out and about or locked up in a bedroom where you have a piece of paper taped up that says, don't open this door, there's a dog in it. Well, how are they supposed to see that room? You know, they need to see the full picture. So please either crate your dogs or have an arrangement where somebody walks the dog during those showing times, because it's very important. And it's very annoying to agents that are showing it to say, I can't see a certain room or I can't go in a certain area of the house because there's a pet there. And then second thing along those lines is, if you have a rental property that you're trying to sell and there's tenants in there, you have to have a very clear understanding with your tenants about what the expectations are to show, because while they may tell you they're super flexible and they're willing to do whatever to help you sell, the reality of it is that sometimes with these overwhelming amounts of showings is they're going to be overwhelmed by it, and they're going to get annoyed, and they're going to start to be uncooperative with your showing. So please have an understanding or a plan to tackle these things when they come up, or
And
wait until the tenant's out.
True.
Our preference, by the way, is always going to be to tell you, please do not list your house with a tenant in. But when it's unavoidable, and like Megan said, you can use showing time as a tool to help with that, where you can say, okay, please tell me, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, what are some days of the week that we could have a ton of showings? And if they say, okay, you know, weeknights from 5 to 7, you can block that out in showing time. And that way agents know, and the tenants aren't getting inundated with requests. You can say, you know, on a weekend, is there a block of time that we can use? You know, Walter's right. You want to balance your convenience with making this a welcoming environment for every buyer who comes in. So if there's a kind of pet that they're scared of, or you know, a tenant asleep on the sofa, or something else that's going to make them uncomfortable about spending time in your house, they're not going to get as good a view of it as they would. So you really want to create a welcoming environment as much as you possibly can. The only other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit, and Walter touched on it, is that there is a very strong possibility that, and I apologize because there's some indoor basketball being played right now. So hopefully that's not too distracting, but just to wrap up, there's a very strong possibility that as a seller in this market that you will have more than one offer or more than one interested party. So part of what we have to do is evaluate, kind of walk through with you in advance. What's your preference on how to handle that? How are you planning to handle that in a way that is ethical to you, but also that gives you the best chance at getting the best offer? Do you guys want to kind of comment a little bit on what you've been through with that, or?
I do have one thing where some sellers have asked me, okay, well, we have promises of offers, or we have one offer in hand. Can you just tell other agents that we have multiple offers, or you know, just kind of embellish it a little bit? And I've always erred on the side of caution. I do not want to be caught bluffing about stuff like that. So the most ethical thing to do is to just tell the truth. You don't necessarily have to be so transparent that you tell them every little detail, but don't lie about it, because it could end up biting you. in the rear, because if you tell people you have multiple offers and you'll pick the best one and they call your bluff and they're the only offer and it's not what you like, you can't go back and then counter them. It's just the way things are now, is you got to put your best foot forward, and if that's the best you can get for it, you can't come back to them and say, oh, let's negotiate because I lied about having more than one offer. So
yeah, and this, a lot of these things that you're hearing kind of all go to the general category of, you want to do the best you can to create goodwill between yourself and your prospective buyer, because kind of I would say the other main thing that we've always learned is the instant that you, what my mom would say, get on your high horse about something, the next day you're going to need a little grace from the other party. So as gracious and honest as you can be, without endangering your strategic position, we're always going to be, trying to keep things in a win-win type of situation. So, tackling those little repairs, making the house easy to show, making the buyer feel welcome, being honest in your negotiations, all, are going to go towards that general atmosphere of getting you through that contract process as easily as possible and with the best outcome for you. You don't want to predispose a buyer to have a bad taste in their mouth before they're even under contract. So that's really good advice that, and that's what you have us for. We're the calm voice of reason and can help you when you just need a moment, because it does happen in this process. So I really appreciate everybody's attention. Is there anything else you guys wanted to sort of bring up or sum up?
I think it's a lot of overwhelming information. This process is a long process to sell your homes. It's not something that we could just get done and explain in detail in a half an hour that we just did, right? So there's a lot more that goes into it, and in the nooks and crannies between these steps that we highlighted. But for the most part, we've covered it. But if you guys have questions, send them in. Let us know.
Hit us up.
Yep.
We'll help you out. Also, when we post this on Facebook, I'll post the link. We have each season, we have an updated guide for buyers and sellers. So we'll post the link to those. And that'll give you kind of an overview too of kind of current economic conditions and, what things you need to be aware of that are very seasonal and time specific. So any other questions, please let us know. Thank you, Walter. Thank you, Megan. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
All right.
Cool.
And
See
thank
you
you.
guys.
See ya. Sounds good.
Basketball. Thank you.
Thanks.